Should the Archbishop of York follow the Archbishop of Canterbury and resign over his handling of a sex abuse case? Hi, welcome to the channel. My name is Rev Dan. I'm a vicar in the Church of England. On this channel you get all my views as a parish priest on all the Christian news happening in the world today. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it, comment down below, and don't forget to hit that notification bell. So there are calls after an investigation by the BBC for the Archbishop of York to stand down over his handling of a sexual abuse case, an historic sexual abuse case, once again when he was Bishop of Chelmsford. The pressure is mounting. I have just got back from church and there is a petition for him to resign on change.org, and it sits at the moment 14,500 people have signed it to call for his resignation. There's a lot of anger out there, especially reading on X, formerly Twitter, of what people are saying. There's a lot of technicalities in here. I'm using today the Church Times article because it covers a lot of the things in here. I'm pulling out some of those things that are a bit more technical. But at the end of the day, should he resign? He's now second in charge of the Church of England anyway, but in a few weeks' time, when Justin Welby steps down from his position as Archbishop of Canterbury on the 6th of January, the Archbishop of York will step in as a temporary head of the Church of England. Is that tenable? Is that realistic? There are some bishops like Bishop Anne Hartley, who is the Bishop of Newcastle, calling for his resignation. Other bishops are saying, no, actually he shouldn't resign. It's more about the process and the intricacies of the Church of England, the way we run ourselves. And it'll be pulled out in the article in here. But like I said, comment down below what you think. So the Church Times says with their headline, bishops reject calls for Archbishop York to resign over handling of Tudor case. So they say there are questions to answer about the safeguarding processes and decisions that meant that David Tudor was able to remain in ministry until 2019, and he was in ministry for years. But the Archbishop of York's resignation would not be the solution, bishops have said. On Monday morning, the Bishop of Newcastle, Dr. Helen Ann Hartley, had called on Archbishop Cottrell to step down over the case of Mr. Tudor, a priest who had faced multiple police investigations for indecent assault of girls aged below 16. These are young girls here. This is serious and so wrong. On Monday afternoon, however, the Bishop of Berkhamsted, the Right Reverend Julie Connolty, said that although she agreed with Dr. Hartley that questions needed to be asked about the case, she did not think that Archbishop Cottrell should resign. She said, we can keep having resignations, but that isn't going to solve our problems. And she's the Deputy Lead Bishop for Safeguarding for the Church of England, and she told BBC's Radio 4's The World at One. She said that while she had questions about some aspects of the case and thought that the church safeguarding process needed to change, it seemed to her that Archbishop Cottrell did not have the power to remove this cleric from office right up until the point at which he was able to suspend him. There are questions to answer. I'm absolutely clear about that. And in that, I agree with Bishop Helen Ann. I'm less clear as to whether those issues are a resigning matter in the context of this case, she said. And that's why it's difficult, because there are historic things here which, when Stephen Cottrell was Bishop of Chelmsford, that he inherited. So this was an ongoing case that when he became bishop in 2010, he inherited this, and there was already things in the past. That's why it makes perhaps this a bit more technically difficult. But there are moral things in here, and we'll see that a bit later as well. Bishop Connolty said that on the basis of the information in the BBC investigation into the case, she could not see grounds for Archbishop Cottrell's resignation. On the same programme, the Bishop of Winchester, the Right Reverend Philip Mount Stephen, emphasised that bishops do not have the power to hire and fire, and that it seemed that the Archbishop of York had his hands tied in the case of Mr. Tudor. And so the Archbishop of York put out his own statement as well along those lines, that he was speaking with lawyers, and legally it was hard or impossible to remove this problem priest, as which he was, because he was just doing awful things with young girls. Bishop Mount Stephen praised the BBC's investigation, but said that these questions of resignation should not take place amid a trial by media, but that established processes should be followed and improvements brought in to bear the whole system. But I think the problem here, and this is what a lot of people are saying, is that, look, he's going to step in for the Archbishop of Canterbury, and this is really a bad cloud. It's another safeguarding case by this priest who was abusing young girls, which he admitted, and that's why he got removed from office. But that's the backlash of this, and the nearly 15,000 people calling for his resignation now is this, because he's going to step into the post of looking after the Church of England. Goes on to say, the lead bishop for safeguarding, the Bishop of Stepney, Dr. Joanne Grenfell, also focused on the need for reform, including the way in which the clergy are employed and disciplined. And this is right. So the whole of this case falls over different periods of the way that the clergy were employed. So this priest, David Tudor, was what they call freehold, and freehold was around for many years, and it got changed to what they call common tenure in 2011. And so when he became vicar of the last parish that he was in, I think it's 2009, he was on freehold, and freehold gave priests a lot of rights, a lot more than common tenure. And common tenure is still quite robust. And remember, we're office holders, not employees, so it works differently for clergy. So there was a lot of protection in one way or another around him being on freehold. Also, historically, we didn't have the clergy disciplinary measure until 2003. So anything before that was done under the old system and not the new system. And so when the new system was brought in, it had specific rules. The question keeps going back, were there ways to get him out? Were there different ways to get him out? Now, that's an interesting question. The Bishop of Newcastle, on an interview with Radio 4, brought up the capability measure, because there were sanctions imposed on this priest because he wasn't allowed to be around children. So he's still in post, but they said you can't be around children. And that's one of the stipulations, which was crazy. And I saw it on one news article, I think it was Newsnight or something like that. Anyway, there's so much going around, it might not have been there, that they had a youth club next to the vicarage, I think it was, or the church, and instead of moving the priest, they moved the youth club to a different place because they felt that he was such a danger. You know, it's crazy when you hear these stories coming out. It's absolutely mind-blowing. Instead of dealing with the problem, you're moving these children away to make sure that they are safe. So you are crossing over these things, and all these things have legalities as well within them. But, you know, there are countless stories of priests out there who have been got rid of in one way or another by bishops, and in different ways. And so the question a lot of people are asking is, why not in this case? If this person posed so much of a danger and was known and could not be around children and was banned from being around children or alone with children, why couldn't something have been done about it? And I think that's one of the big questions asked here. So the lead bishop for safeguarding, the Bishop of Stepney, Dr. Joanne Grenfell, also focused on the need for reform, including the way in which clergy are employed and disciplined. And she said, alongside better safeguarding structures, which have already been revised, we need issues of clergy conduct more broadly to be tackled. This must include better use of effective disciplinary and capability processes and the proper use of risk assessment, so that people are not allowed to continue in ministry when unacceptable risk is present, she said. And it's in there, she said, disciplinary and capability. So, if someone cannot do their job fully, then that's a capability measure issue. And if someone is a parish priest and they got local schools and all these things that they're not allowed to go into, they're not fully performing their role. Now, I can imagine it's quite difficult to navigate through that, because that was imposed on him as part of punishment and for the safety of those children. But it still means, it was a tool perhaps to be looked at. Maybe they did, I don't know. But current rules prevent the pursuit of a disciplinary case on the basis of accusations that have already been investigated. There is no provision for removing a cleric from office based on a risk assessment. So a risk assessment, is a risk assessment, and then so that's what they did. They assessed them on a risk, so they put things in place like you're not allowed in schools, you're not allowed near children, all those things. So that's the risk assessment, but it doesn't stipulate removal from office. But what's already been investigated, and this is one of the, in a sense, the failings. Same with if we go back to John Smythe, is in the past. So he was jailed for sexual abuse for 6 months, but the case in the end was dismissed because of technicalities, so it didn't stay on his record. So there was no actual case in that sense to be answered. There was nothing staying on his criminal record because of a technicality, even though he was serving in prison for 6 months. But because of other accusations, because they've already been investigated, and he was banned from ministry for 5 years, and at that point it should have been life. And looking back, is you can't understand why that wasn't for life, because this was sexual abuse of young girls. He was allowed to come back into ministry, so that the first failing was there. As I said with Archbishop Welby, it should never have come to his desk in 2013. This should have been dealt with properly back then. So because it wasn't dealt with, it has come, but that's no excuse. That's just admitting that there's a failure back then. He should have been banned from being a priest for life for what he did, but he didn't. He got banned for 5 years, so he's allowed to come back. But now we have to deal with what happened and how it was handled. Dr. Grenfell said that she would also like to see clergy terms of service and the establishment of an office for professional conduct in ministry. Currently, the status of clergy as office holders makes it harder for them to be removed from post. And it does. And in these circumstances, it's made it really difficult to remove this priest from their post. But it also offers protection against misuse. And there could be a danger going forward that you change this for the minority of people who are just awful and they need to be got out the church and prohibited from being a priest for life, and then used against the other majority, weaponized. So I'm all for change to make sure that the public are safe from these people, but not at the expense of those who are doing good work. And it sadly, because people could be weaponized. And so there needs to be safeguards in place to identify those who are doing wrong in sexual abuse and spiritual abuse and those things, but not be used as a weapon. Some of these issues came into the spotlight in the summer when former Bishop of Blackburn, the Right Reverend Julian Henderson, defended a payout for a canon at Blackburn Cathedral as the only option for his removal. And so I covered this last year, and this was another priest who was, as they say in the article, a real danger to young people. And the only way that they could remove him from office, because again he had been through the police, but there was no criminal charges brought, so there's nothing to say that he actually done anything wrong, was to remove him from his office and then pay out, which they think is something from like £240,000 to £260,000 to get him out, because it was better to pay him than to let him continue. And in 2009, it says in the BBC report that in a cathedral inspection concluded that Canon Hinley may pose a threat to young men and to the cathedral's name. And it says, should the unthinkable happen, accusations of inaction will fly, a life will be damaged, God's name besmirched, and the reputation of the cathedral damaged. So, but they couldn't get him out. So in the end, they paid him off to go. And as horrible as that is, because these people should face the punishment, to protect those vulnerable people, was that an option, just to pay this person to go off, to get out? An independent review of the way in which the accusations against Mr. Tudor were handled has been commissioned, a decision welcomed by the current Bishop of Chelmsford, Dr. Gooley Francis Decani. I understand the desire to respond quickly and decisively, she said in a statement on Monday. At the same time, and even more importantly, we must respond well. I know that in situations like this, turning to process can be perceived as an easy way out, but it is poor process or absence of process that has led to many of the church failings in the past, and we must not repeat these mistakes now. We must follow these professionals who are particularly responsibility. It is the time and space to review this case properly and fully, so we can be guided by their conclusions, he said. I have to say this again, that the safeguarding which once was is not the safeguarding that is now, and the work that we do at parish level is really, really good. And we try to keep people safe. Could there potentially be priests still in the Church of England at this moment who are abusing people in different ways, sexually or spiritually? Yes, but hopefully the processes are a lot better to identify them. Now the mechanics in that one way, as I've been speaking, are still the same, so they need to be looked at. But how do we remove them when it's quite difficult to remove them? And that's what we're seeing in this case. But there has to be one way or another to do it. Do they have to see what's happening, review what's happening? Yeah, absolutely, they do. The one thing is by putting things in process and in the proper way, is can it fully function when we know the processes weren't working well? That's the question, isn't it? Are the processes robust enough at this moment to be able to look at what's gone wrong? This all comes back to independent safeguarding, having safeguarding outside of the Church of England, so we're not doing it ourselves, but with the caveat that the people who are doing that independent safeguarding are Christians, so they understand the Christian faith, so they understand what spiritual abuse is, and not just seeing it from a non-Christian point of view. But we will see, and that's a question. It is a total mess at the moment. So today, I hugely busy day this morning. I had a couple of meetings followed by some preparation for a memorial service I got on Thursday, followed by a burial of ashes in our churchyard with a grieving family, followed by 2 big services where our local school came down at 2 different times. We got a double form entry into our local school, so we had years 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 come down on 2 separate services with over 100 parents, grandparents and carers there. This is what we are doing, but it did feel throughout that day, knowing the story going on, like as I stood in the church, is that you got these stories flying around the news, and they are all over the news. I've seen it on the BBC, ITV, Channel 4 did a special last night, Newsnight did something, I've seen it in foreign papers as well, and you going, we are the local church trying to do this good work, and and our safeguarding is robust, to have all these stories in the paper, and you can kind of feel it, as it were. Maybe it's just in my head. I don't know what those people were thinking in the church, but it's out there and it just doesn't look good. And one of the young girls was like, she had a clarinet. She said, I need to warm up my clarinet, and all the parents would come in, and we said with the head teacher, can go in that room at the back. Now our administrator was at the back, and it's like, well, I've got all these, I'm walking up here and following this girl, the head just behind me, but he stayed outside. And what in my mind, I'm just thinking, what does that look like? So I stayed in the doorway, and it's just like, okay, so you go there, he's out here, that's okay. But it just, and this is the thing, what are people thinking? And this is why it needs to be dealt with, and dealt with well. Dr. Francis Decani joined the Bishop of Southwark, the Right Reverend Christopher Chusson, in offering to meet survivors in the case. The abuse mostly took place while Mr. Tudor was ministering in the Diocese of Southwark in the 1970s and 80s. The behaviours admitted by David Tudor indicate a serious and damaging breach of his pastoral and professional obligations as a priest, and I would like to apologise unreservedly for the pain and trauma that his actions have caused, Bishop Chusson said. I'm deeply grateful for those who have had the courage to share their experiences and engage with this long and difficult process. And just to say, and this isn't any way to, attack, but this priest was a liberal Catholic priest, so on not an evangelical, where John Smythe was, because I saw a lot of negative things about, this is evangelical, and no, I just want to say this happens across different church traditions, across the different theologies. We get these people. It's not just one group. It's across. And this man had abused for years, and many people knew. I'm not saying there was a cover up or anything like that. What I'm just saying is, it's what we have to say is not get into our different theologies and where we stand, but to say this happens across. It's not just one group in the church. That unfortunately what we want to do is cut it out, and in our different circles, just to keep an eye on what's going on and making sure that not just thinking, it only happens in the evangelical side of the church, it never happens to ours. No, it happens, and it needs to be found out, and these people need to be, as I said, kicked out of the church and never to be a priest again. The BBC investigation found that in 1988, Mr. Tudor twice stood trial in both cases, accused of indecent assault against girls under the age of 16. In the first trial, he was acquitted, but had admitted to having sex with one girl when she was 16. In the other case, he was convicted of indecent assault against 3 girls and served 6-month sentence, but the conviction was subsequently quashed on the basis that the judge had misdirected the jury. So he was convicted because the judge had misdirected the jury. It was quashed, so there was nothing on his record, and that's part of the problem, because that could have been used to get this guy out. One of the girls in the first trial, whom the BBC refers to as Debbie, told the programme that she was abused by Mr. Tudor between the ages of 13 and 15. She said, he abused his position of trust. He had a huge effect on my life. Having the huge secret pulled away from my parents, I lived with the shame for 40 years. So this is the bit of pleasure that these people find in those fleeting moments has an effect. So she said, having the huge secret, which she kept because she can feel, damaged the relationship with her parents, and she's lived with shame for 40 years. So the trauma doesn't stop. It continues and continues. The BBC investigation also found that in 2012, Mr. Tudor paid $10,000 to a woman known as Jessica, who says that she was sexually abused from the age of 11. Just sick, man. The payment was to settle a civil claim brought against Mr. Tudor after the police had decided not to pursue charges. So for whatever reason, the police decided not to. It's 11. Come on. The police decided not to pursue charges. So a civil claim was brought. He paid £10,000 to this woman. But it wasn't. It was like not an admission of guilt, technically. Nobody would make a payment if they haven't got something to hide, Jessica told the BBC. She called on Archbishop Cottrell to resign. It feels like he spat in my face. I think he should leave the church as well. So, what do you think? Paying £10,000 and saying you don't pay £10,000 for nothing, right? You don't pay £10,000 for nothing. There's got to be, because technically, again, and this is where it comes in with the law and the lawyers, because he's not admitting guilt, he's just giving away £10,000. They're saying there's nothing they can do, but there's enough. We get into morally here, and I think this is what a lot of people are saying. Morally, just use one of the mechanisms you can and get this person out. And if he's going to come back later, I think this is what the Bishop of Newcastle was saying, just get him out. And if he's going to come back later and claim any unfair dismissal or then to deal with that, it's better to get this person out the church rather than saying we can't do anything because of legal implications. A spokesperson for Archbishop Cottrell told the BBC that he had been guided by legal advice and that no further action could be taken, and then Mr. Tudor admitted no liability in making the payment. It's crazy, isn't it? And this is a problem where we are, and this is, in a sense, saying before that you kind of need reform in one way to stop anything, because they're saying technically we can't do anything. And yeah, maybe absolutely right. Technically you couldn't, but an 11-year-old girl. In 2015, Mr. Tudor was appointed an honorary canon of Chelmsford Cathedral, a move that a spokesman for Archbishop Cottrell said had been the result of a policy change to grant all area deans the title. So this is part of the problem as well. So this Mr. Tudor was area dean before Stephen Cottrell became Bishop of Chelmsford, but he was area dean, I think, for years, for like 15 years after, up until the point where he got kicked out. And so the policy in the Diocese of Chelmsford was all area deans get made honorary canons. It was just like, it's just what they did. But it's a position of prestige. It's a position of you've done good work. You served the church well after many years. And so that surely, and this is the question being asked, surely as bishop you just say not him. And the other question is why did he remain area dean for so long? Because in my diocese you serve as area dean, I think, is it 3 years or 5 years or something like that? It is a particular term, be it 3 or 5. I don't know in the Diocese of Chelmsford whether they have that policy as well. If they do, that's the question. Why was he allowed, knowing what he had done, and there were stipulations on the type of ministry that he could and couldn't do? Why was he area dean? Because that's just crazy. How could you fulfill your role as area dean as well? It doesn't make sense. And like I said, I don't know the policy at the time in the Diocese of Chelmsford. Maybe you become area dean and you're there until you step down. I don't know. What I do know, in some dioceses like mine, you are there for a certain period. But surely he should not be an area dean, considering the context of what they knew. And in one way or another, they were waiting to get him out. And I'm sure they would. I'm sure in one way or another, their hands were tied, and we're talking legally here and technically, and they were just waiting for one thing. And as soon as it came, they got him. And I'm sure that's absolutely right. But again, we talk about the moral aspect here and the danger that he posed by continually being in those positions. And who says that he didn't manipulate his way, to be with children? Who was watching him all that time? Even though he had those things upon him, these people like this, they manipulate, don't they? They manipulate. The question is, why was he made an honorary canon? I know the process was there, the policy was there, but he could have just said, don't make him an honorary canon. Dr. Hartley, however, told the BBC that this could not be justified. The policy changed. By making someone an honorary canon, you are absolutely uplifting someone's ministry. The granting of an honorary canon to Mr. Tudor was something that Bishop Connolty could not understand, she said. She also queried why Mr. Tudor could not have been removed from the position of area dean. So you got two bishops there agreeing. The abuse is absolutely appalling. It seems clear to me that he should never have been allowed to return to ordained ministry after the 5-year suspension, Bishop Connolty said on Monday. In a statement, Bishop Cottrell said the process at the time did not prevent him from returning to ministry in the Diocese of Southwark in 1994. Changes to the way safeguarding is now managed and scrutinised would mean the decision taken in 1988 would not allow that to take place. The BBC reported that Mr. Tudor's return to ministry was assisted by the then Archbishop of Canterbury, Lord Carey. Leaked documents obtained by the BBC reportedly show that in 1996 Lord Carey asked for Mr. Tudor's name to be removed from a central record of clergy who had been subject to disciplinary proceedings. According to the BBC, Lord Carey said that he had no memory of Mr. Tudor, and a spokesman for the COE said that the agreement that Mr. Tudor could return was made with some trepidation. If you've got trepidation, you don't do it. If you've got trepidation, it's like, there's a question also for the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Lord Carey, to answer. To say that he had no memory, you might not, but there's going to be documented evidence here. And if people remember that the return of this vicar to his role, or a role, was made with some trepidation, there's enough witnesses out there to substantiate what's being said here. He should have never returned to ministry. A spokesman for the Diocese of Southwark told the BBC that the decision to impose a 5-year rather than a lifetime ban on Mr. Tudor seems absolutely inexcusable in today's context and would not be made today. And absolutely, that's because things have changed. That's because things have changed since those previous times, and safeguarding wasn't as robust as it is today. But times do go on, and this person was in ministry. He got kicked out at the age of 69 just a couple of months ago when they finally managed to get him, and he admitted just the two things that he did. But safeguarding goes on. What's disturbing in one way or another about this is that the way that the Church of England operates, and for good reason that it had, for the protection of clergy and the office that we have, made it impossible to get someone who was known to be abusing young girls out. Same with Canon Hindley as well, that it was impossible when it was known what they were doing and still continuing to do to get them out. There has to be change in place, like I said before, to ensure that people can't play the system or aren't protected by the system, but also ensuring that it can't be used, so the system cannot be abused and weaponized in any way against good clergy. But the other thing, the other couple of things is, why was he allowed to remain as an area dean? Why was he allowed to become an honorary canon, which is, like I said, a position of prestige? And why did they not just use any mechanism to get this person out who is a danger to young girls? And some of the things out there that you hear, and I'm not going to say it on here because it's disgusting. It's bad enough saying that he sexually abused a 11-year-old girl, but the actual instances of what happened were vile. And that being known, because it's reported now, why wasn't any mechanism used? And so with this whole thing, why now, or how can the Archbishop of York's position be tenable? Because he was in that from 2010 when he became Archbishop, 2019 or something like that. Maybe later, I'm not sure. But in that time, he was bishop when this vicar was there, and known how awful he was. So we will see, because the Archbishop of York, as I said, is going to take over from Justin Welby to look after the Church of England as Archbishop of Canterbury until we get a new Archbishop of Canterbury. But this is also going to be the black cloud, as it were. Like I said, I was in my church doing services with people coming in from the school, and you're kind of going, you know, this makes our work really hard. It's the time of Christmas. We want to welcome people into the church, and all the headlines are just about this awfulness that's happened. But this is a responsibility that you take. You become a bishop, this is a responsibility that you take. You become Archbishop, this is a responsibility that you take. This is why the Archbishop of Canterbury has stepped down. By the way, I watched the Newsnight programme, and the ex-Labour MP, who was, I think, the Shadow Attorney General or something like that, whatever they're called, said that the statement that was released by the Archbishop of York, she said it was awful. It should never have been. It was just the absolutely wrong thing to do, and that adds on to this as well. So we will wait and see where this goes. Let's just refresh this page and see where the signatures have got up. Wow! Just in the time of this video, it's gone to 17,583 signatures. 2,906 people are signed today, and I think this was started yesterday. So that's crazy amounts of people signing, calling for his resignation. Is his position still tenable, or is it going to be disastrous for the Church of England? As that other article said, should the unthinkable happen with this Canon Hinley, accusations of inaction will fly, a life will be damaged, God's name will be besmirched, and the reputation of the cathedral damaged. Taking that statement in mind, what's the damage that's being done for the church at the moment, and going forward, how is it for the victims and survivors, not only of David Tudor, but also of other people who have been abused and who are currently being abused? And how are we going to sort out the Church of England? I spoke before about the national church and the local church. You know, it makes it so hard to minister when you feel that you're under a black cloud because of this going on. And how will it be sorted out? You remove both archbishops, who's leading in the sense, who's the figureheads for the Church of England. It comes down to the local diocese bishops. But where do we go from here? And should he resign?